I'm Bella, and this is Workstream by Partners, a show where we talk with industry leaders and experts about pressing themes and topics in business and beyond. Today, we welcome our guest, Jay Mattern, Chief Executive Officer of Villing Company. Jay, thank you so much for meeting with me today.
Well, thank you for having me, Bella.
I wanted to begin by asking you if you could tell me a little bit about Villing Company.
Well, Villing is a fully integrated marketing communications agency, kind of a full spectrum of services, anything from branding, corporate marketing strategies, PR, digital strategies, digital websites. We're all about marketing and communicating effectively.
Cool, awesome, very important in this day and age. So that's really interesting. You have quite an impressive background in the staffing industry. Could you tell me a little bit about that part of your career and what led you to your current position?
Well, I came out of school like most young people, thinking I was going to, put a dent in the universe, to borrow Steve Jobs' language, and didn't quite know where to start or what I wanted to do, and tried a few things, and ended up co-founding a staffing firm back in 1987 with two other family members. All three of us were in a place in our careers where we could make that change, and we knew nothing about staffing and thought, well, it was a high growth industry. There wasn't a lot of competition, or at least as much as there is now. It was fairly open territory. And so we thought, well, this looks like something, let's try this. Let's see what happens. And so we started our one office in Elkhart, Indiana. And from there, over time, grew it to from zero to almost $400 million. We sold it in 2011 to a larger staffing firm headquartered in Paris. And then, that started our exit strategy. And I actually left the firm then at the end of 2019, at the end of last year, as the CEO, and retired for a while anyway.
That's awesome. That's a really, really interesting story. Could you elaborate on what you feel distinguishes marketing from sales? I know we talked a little bit about that, and I know you feel strongly about it.
Well, yeah, and I feel strongly about it because I was stupid for 32 years. I was in the staffing industry for 32 years, and I thought sales and marketing was the same thing. And shame on me, I actually have a marketing degree from Indiana University, so I should have known better, right? I don't remember that class. I probably skipped it, to be totally honest. It was probably an 8 a.m. class, and well, you know how that is, right? Yeah, sometimes you don't feel like getting up. But having come from the staffing world, which is it's a sales-driven business. I mean, there's no question about it. But coming over to the marketing side, I've realized, well, wait a second. Sales and marketing, what's interesting about it is sales and marketing are completely two different things, two completely different functions. And yet when they are put together correctly, when they're integrated properly, one jumpstarts the other, and so it was a great learning experience for me to say, wait a second, sales and marketing. Okay, when I say marketing, I don't really mean sales, and when I say sales, I don't really mean marketing. But yet, if I know the difference between those two things, and I use them correctly in their proper form and function, I get an end result that is it's synergistic. It's 1 + 1 = 3. But just to be clear, when we say sales, really, I think here's the most simple way that I can explain it, coming from a non-marketing background. When I talk about sales, I would say that is me reaching out to you, Bella.
Right.
When I talk about marketing, that's you reaching out to me.
Right.
So it's that's why I think those two are so important, that they're utilized properly, because I can make communications to you about my product or service and ask you if you'd be interested. But I also, if I do this correctly and have an effective marketing program, at the same time, I may not find you to be able to reach out to you to say, hey, would you be interested in what I have? But you may find me as a result of my effective marketing program, and you may say, hey, these got something that I'd like to have. Let me figure out how to get a hold of these guys. So that's what's exciting about it, is when you put those two together, it's like I said, it's dynamite. It's a very synergistic process. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people, and I'm sure we'll talk about this in a minute, but one of the areas that we're concentrating our marketing efforts is I'm going back to the staffing world, because I know that world well. And I know that they're all sitting there thinking that sales and marketing are the same thing. And if I can get them to understand, like I did, that number one, that they're different. And number two, if you do some of the marketing along with some of your sales, you're going to get a much better result. That's where we're headed.
It's funny because it sounds so intuitive, but like even to me, like until you brought it up to me, like I never really considered what it is that distinguishes the two.
Yeah.
So could you share an example of a common mistake that staffing companies make in regards to marketing?
Well, that's the first one. I think we just covered it. The fact that they think they're when they're selling, well, that's marketing. I think one of the other big mistakes, and again, this is an area that Villing we've got a program that we're rolling out into the staffing world, because it's such a huge area that I think needs to be addressed. And that is their staffing companies have two different clients. They have the customer that actually, buys their services, the organization that says, I need to have temporary labor. I need some contingent workers in my warehouse. I need 10 guys to work in my warehouse. So that's the one client. But the second client is those 10 workers that are going to go to work in that warehouse. They have two separate audiences. They've got two customers. They're two sets of customers. And one of the mistakes, and again, I'm coming from having made this mistake myself. Staffing firms spend 99.9% of their time and effort and money towards communicating to that client audience. Rightly so, right? Because those are the guys that ultimately write the check. That's where the money comes from. So they tend to spend all of their time, and their communication messages are all directed towards that client. They don't spend any time communicating to the other client, other than just, hey, I got a warehouse that needs 10 people. Well, go put something on a job board. Let's hope that 10 people show up. And so one of the mistakes that's being made that hopefully we're going to be able to help staffing firms correct is, you need to create a compelling message to that other audience, that other group, those other sets of clients. It's a completely different message than the message that you speak to the clients that write the checks. But there needs to be a clear, concise, and very compelling message that draws, just like we talked a minute ago, a message. They're just doing it one way, right? They're just going to you saying, hey, would you like to work this job I've got? If they do this correctly, if they deploy marketing correctly and have a compelling message to that audience, then not only will they'll of course still continue to post those jobs on job boards and do all of those outbound things, but if they do this correctly, they will have a more successful inbound program and will attract people to them, the qualified people that want to go to work for them. And so that's really another big area that I think, the challenge is going to be getting back to what he said a minute ago. First, I have to get everybody in that vertical to understand that, hey, sales and marketing aren't the same thing. Once they get that, then it's okay. Now let's talk about how you're communicating to your candidate base. What's the message that, well, we really don't have one. Okay, well, that's what we're here to help you do. What is it that would resonate with that? Who are the folks that you're trying to put to work, and what resonates with them, and what's the proper channel or channels to communicate with them through, and we help them put a program together to address that.
That's really cool. It sounds like you're very focused on kind of creating synergy between like these divides.
I love synergy. Yeah, I love it. If you get things just right, it's amazing what happens.
Yeah, it's really cool. So clearly you're very passionate about the tone of advertising, and it's clearly very important. But could you tell me a little bit about why it matters, especially during this time of the pandemic?
Yeah, that is a great question, Bella. And so, I'm sure everyone will understand when I say we get bombarded every day with lots of we get negative news anyway, but now throw a pandemic in the middle of that, and it's times 10, right? So we hear all about all of the bad things that are happening. We hear about, fights breaking out over who's wearing masks and who's not wearing masks, and social distancing that's not taking place on the beach, and, opening stores that shouldn't be open and closing stores that shouldn't be closed, and how many people died today. We're inundated with all of that bad news. And I think it's important for the marketers like Villing and folks that own channels that have the ability to have a voice and to communicate and to educate, that we use that platform in a more positive and optimistic way. That we say, I'm not saying to ignore what's going on that's bad. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, hey, there's plenty of people that are talking about that. Let's find the silver linings in those dark clouds. Let's find the things what's happening that's happening well. Well, gee, the curve did flatten. Now, I think there's been a little bit of a spike, but it's not of any concern that my understanding. So, that's good news. The curve flattened. Let's talk about that. Who's reporting on that? Who's saying, hey, this is we're seeing some progress. Who's talking about a nice time they had at their favorite restaurant, even though they had to socially distance and wear a mask to go in and sit at their table, but they had a great time going back to the restaurant that they used to enjoy going to. Those kinds of messages, I think it's really important for the marketing world to step up and to be more optimistic and to be more positive. And you and I chatted earlier, and I'm about halfway through an article that it's titled "Marketers Arise." I'm going to call on the marketing world to be a little bit more positive. Let's see if we can't balance the negative news a little bit. Find the positive, and let's give people hope. Let's give people an opportunity to see our way past this, to look towards the future instead of looking backwards.
I think that's so inspiring, because ultimately I think perspective shapes our reality so much. And I'm so in agreement with you about needing more positive silver lining to look forward to.
And again, I'm not suggesting that we ignore the bad. I'm not saying let's be Pollyannic and just pretend like nothing bad happened. I'm just saying there's plenty of bad news to go around, but somebody needs to step up, and it's the communicators, it's the marketing folks that have those channels, that have those voices. I just think it's important that they start to shape the tone of the conversation a little bit, to the extent that we can.
Agreed. Wow, cool. That's a really great perspective, I think. So we kind of talked about this already, but if you could offer me another tip, maybe, that you could offer staffing companies in regards to how they could become the employer of choice. I know this is something that you focus on a lot. I think that could be valuable to our listeners.
Well, yeah, this kind of goes back to that whole idea of, hey, there's two separate messages that a staffing firm needs to communicate at the same time. One directed towards the client and one directed towards the candidate. But talking about that message, then what's the right message for that candidate, that audience, and how do you present yourself in such a way that you're more appealing? You're maybe in the top 5 or 10% of the most appealing places that someone might want to work. Well, obviously, one of the ways to do that is to do what are the things you can do to become what I call, the industry uses this term as well, I didn't make it up, but be the employer of choice. Now, typically what staffing firms do is they rely on their relationships with their clients in other words, they refer to their clients. Well, we have clients who are the employer of choice. Boeing's not a good example, I guess, is it? That's probably a pretty bad example. 3M or some large organization, Google, Facebook, right? Those would certainly be considered employers of choice. But I think where staffing firms fail, or where they miss the mark, is they're the employer. And for folks in the staffing world, they know what I'm talking about. The staffing firm is actually the employer. It's not 3M. It's not those other organizations, not Google and Facebook. It's the staffing firm. And so the staffing firm really needs to stop and say, wait a minute, what should we do to be the employer of choice? If we're the employer of choice and someone chooses to want to work with us, it's going to be much easier for them to find the right opportunity for them amongst the many clients that we service. So I think that's, again, maybe that goes into back to your question about a mistake that's made as well. I think it gets overlooked. I think that the staffing firms that we work with just don't stop to say, wait a minute, I'm the employer. I should be It should be me that's the employer of choice. What can I do to be the employer of choice? How can I make this a more appealing, attractive opportunity for the right qualified people? And so then that gets into, and it's not just, hey, maybe we can pay them a little bit more money. I mean, that's certainly important, but benefits and, all of the other ancillary things that come along with that to be employer. What sort of benefit? Are they competitive benefits, and how deep are they, and how wide are they? And, what opportunities are there to learn new skills? And, really, if a staffing firm is the employer as they are, then they really need to step up and be the employer and act like the employer.
Absolutely. Again, like bringing a new perspective. It sounds like that's really what you do. It's awesome. I have another question regarding COVID-19. So I'm curious as to how you predict that the economy is, or how the economic recovery of staffing firms will pan out post COVID-19.
Yeah, that's a really tough one, and that's another one of those things where pick your news source, and you can get So what are we going to have? Are we going to have a V recovery? Are we going to have a W? Are we going to have a swoosh? Is it going to be a U? Is it going to be ABC? There are so many different models out there. Who knows, right? So I have to kind of say, and the way you asked the question was, what's my opinion? So I'm going to put a footnote and asterisk by it and say, this is just my opinion. This is just my observation. But I've been in the staffing world for a long time and worked with employment. And of course, employment is a key driver of the economy, right? So I kind of know what some of the levers are to look at to sort of predict what I think is going to happen. What I think a lot of people are looking at, and again, this is the good news versus bad news. Everybody's saying, oh my God, there's 40 million people that are unemployed right now. This is terrible. This is awful. The unemployment rate's out of control. And how are we ever going to get these people back to work? And they're getting extra money on unemployment. Who's going to want to go back to work? So we've got all of these negative forces that appear to make it look like it's going to take years. And I've seen those stories. It's going to take till 2023 before everybody gets back to work. I don't happen to believe that that's true. I think what's going to happen, and I've written several articles about this as well, so it's out there. And if I'm wrong, people are going to pull that up and nose in it. But I think that what we're going to see is the second half of this year. I think we're going to see a rather rapid recovery. And I think if you look at what's happening right now, just the states that are starting to open a little bit, you're seeing people that are going back to restaurants. You're now, and like I said earlier, everybody went to the beach this past weekend, or went camping, or and everybody's reporting on this. Oh my God, look at all these people but the point is, there's a lot of pent-up demand. There's people who want to get out. There's people who want to get back to living their lives, right, and doing the things that they were doing. No, I don't think that new habits have been established and everybody's going to want to live in their house by themselves now, talk like you and I are. I'd love to be sitting there with you talking about this. And I think most people are that way. So I think the second half of the year, I think we're going to see a rather rapid recovery in employment. I think demand is there's a lot of pent-up demand that I think is going to snap back, both B2B and B2C. I think consumers and organizations that buy services. I think that's going to snap back rather quickly once we get over that hump of the early adopters, that the first people that usually jump in are jumping in now. I think once that second wave, those people that sort of hold back a little bit and wait to see, once they see that happening, I think we're going to see a wave of people that are going to want to get back to being consuming, right? And I think that, of course, that's going to place a great deal of demand on companies to get their people back. And so I think there's going to be a mad dash the second half of the year to get people back to work, to put people back to work. I think it's still going to be unlike what it was before the pandemic. We were at 3.5% unemployment, which is essentially full employment. In other words, everybody that wants to work had at least one job, if not more. So now I think you look at this and say, well, gee, now there's 40 million people. It's the opposite. I don't think so. I think there's going to be so much demand. I think it's still going to be an employees market. I think it's still going to be an opportunity for those people to decide, where do I want to go back to work? When do I want to go back? Who do I want to work for? They may go back to work where they worked before, or they may they're going to have a lot of choices, I think, because everyone's going to be looking to get people back in order they can make their products or sell their services or whatever it is, as a result of the demand, I think, that's going to be coming. So I could be wrong, but my sense is, and maybe that's part of that optimism I talked about earlier, right? Maybe there's a little bit of that in there too, but I'm trying to temper that with, being more subjective about looking at what's going on. And I think that's what we're going to see.
Absolutely. I mean, I think your experience lends to a valuable perspective, and I hope that you're correct. I hope that
Me too.
happens.
Like I said, I'm in print, so it could be big trouble if it goes. It could be bad for Villing if it goes the other way.
Well, yeah, but I
I
hope it
don't.
does.
I don't. I think I'm.
Thank you for sharing. So
Sure.
my final question for you is about leadership. In your experience, what are the most important qualities for a leader to embody, and why?
That is a great question to close this conversation with, and it's such an important question. And you can ask 100 different leaders, you'll get 100 different answers. So you're getting my opinion to get once again how I view this. I'm looking right now at the Villing Company values. We've published our values. Everybody has a copy of this, and it's something that's very important. And it explains how we operate our business and how we make decisions. On this page, there's also 5 points under a title here called the CEO role. So here are the 5 bullets, and this is my answer to your question. Number 1, the leader's role is to build their team, his or her team. So leaders typically have a team, right? Now, not always. I mean, leadership could be, individuals have to manage themselves before they can manage other people, right? But I'm talking about a leader that's now, leading an organization. So the one of the most important things is the leader needs to build their team. They constantly need to be engaged with their team. The second thing, they need to manage their direct reports. So they're building a team, which is different from managing your reports. So building a team is kind of a cohesive, collaborative, let's pull everybody into the room and, we're going to work on that. Managing direct reports, now you're talking about individual performance and behaviors and things like that. It's important to separate those two. Number 3, have the difficult conversations. This is where lots of leadership falls right off the map, right? So what do you do when, something isn't good? Someone's got some quirky behavior, but it's, you look at it and you say, well, it's offset by all the great things that they do. But at the same time, you look at that and say, but it's very disruptive to the team. This behavior is disruptive to the team. Lots of leaders will just ignore it and hope it goes away, and it never goes away. It just gets worse. So having those difficult conversations is extremely important for effective leadership. Number 4, running effective meetings. Whether you like it or not, some people love meetings, many people hate meetings. You got to have meetings. You've got to get people on the same page. You've got to pull people together and have conversations and use that as an organization tool to be able to move projects and things forward. So running effective meetings, not having ineffective meetings, not having meetings that no one wants to go to and no one wants to contribute to, but having transparent meetings that where people share and really collaborate. And then last for a leader is consistent messaging and ongoing messaging. Having a message and being consistent with your message. Really, a leader is a brand. Again, I'm going back to marketing and branding, but leaders establish a brand. There's a certain brand that I think that's important for them to establish. And when you have a brand that's effective, well, it's consistent all across the board. And it's consistent in its look, it's consistent in what it says, it's consistent in how it acts. And I think that's true for leaders as well. I think they have to have consistent messaging, and they have to be able to say the same thing over and over and over again, because it's just, just to say it once and think that it's taken hold. Well, I've learned that early on. That doesn't work. Because people will, if they only hear it once or twice, they'll say, well, that's probably really not that important. But if you're constantly reinforcing what's important and utilizing these other things, building your team and managing direct reports, having those difficult conversations, then your messaging will get through. But it takes repetition, repetition, and repetition. So those are my 5 points.
Those are some great points. Thank you for sharing them. I will consider all of those in my future application. Thank you
so
much.
Start with one. Okay. You don't need to do them all at once. Just pick one and kind of work with that and work your way in.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Thank you so much for doing this interview, Jay. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you.
And thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Workstream by Partners. We'll see you next week.